by the military-industrial complex.
It could be seen to move violently forward, violently forward, violently forward.
I'm just a patsy.
Let's win there.
I have a dream.
I said this once or twice, but it bears repeating. If you like your current insurance, you will keep your current insurance.
You think about the Army and the Navy and the missions they run to protect the world, they run on SAP.
Well, you have done a really spectacular job. I guess pretty much everybody at this table is your customer, so
Exactly.
that's not so bad.
Exactly.
I want to congratulate
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you.
And we're back. How you doing, George?
Great, Peter. How about yourself?
I'm fine and dandy. I'm pleased as punch to be here with you.
Well, that's awesome. There's a hole in my bookcase behind me, and sometimes they say the omission is more important than what's the rest of the bookcase, right?
Indeed.
Yes, and that.
So what's the metadata, George?
That's my thank you to you, Peter Duke, for salvaging all these books that are out of print. You're yawning when I say that.
Oh, I thought you were going to hit me with that. My book is missing.
Oh no, no, that wasn't it. No, you dug out this book that Meryl Nass wrote in 2001, and I thought that was really great because, you know, there's nothing like the.
I couldn't find you a digital copy though. You had to go buy it. So you probably have you gotten it yet?
I haven't bought it yet, but I plan to. You know, it's how to make do with anthrax in your life. So she did write a book about this, and that helps a lot. There's another book that's written by another person who was kind of questioning Bruce Ivins during this critical period in our history, and that was this Gary Matsumoto. This author, he wrote a book called Vaccine A. It's on my bookshelf somewhere. I'll put it up there if I find it during the show.
I believe it's at the Duke Report in the book section.
Oh, great.
Yeah. And I'm going to turn off some light here because I've got a little flickering and it's making me crazy.
Okay.
I'm trying to upgrade my entire. Next time you come over here, George, you'll see that my desk will be like much more squared away than it used to be. So, well,
that makes me feel good. No, I'm not sweating you on the books at all. I think it, you know, everything in its time. You know, so
no. I've been kicking ass on the book lately, and it's interesting too because my wife and I are reading now Jason Horsley's latest book, which is called Big Mother, as opposed to Big Brother. Is that right? And it's very good because we're in the first chapter, and it's interesting because he's going down a road that I started to go down, which is that he is trying to reframe reality, but he's doing it in a very intellectual and I would say academic kind of way. I don't mean academic in it's not a page turner, because Jason Horsley is a great writer and it's a really good book. And I highly recommend this book. And I'm only about, 15 or 20 pages into it. But what's interesting is that he's trying to make the exact same points that I'm making in my book, but he's doing it in a very thoughtful and critical way. And I'm doing it in the least thoughtful, most TikTok kind of way. That is, I'm really trying to reduce the number of examples and $3 words to a minimum. I'm looking at 7-word sentences and saying, can I do that in 6? I'm really going through that process at this point.
But you don't want to say, you don't want to take a 7-word sentence, in the distance the dog barked, and you don't want to say in the distance the dog.
Correct. But,
You know.
the example that I've given several times, though, is that I read 140,000 word. No, yeah, is that right? No, 14,000 word article by Lyndon LaRouche that you can also get at the Duke Report. That's also on the members library that I posted the other day. And I reduced it down to one sentence, which is that the battle that's been going on for control of the world over the last 3,000 years is between storytellers on one side and critical thinkers on the other. And the storytellers are winning. And the storytellers historically have won because stories require a lot less cognitive discipline, ability, effort to consume than things that we talk about on this show, because on this show, we talk about taking a look at evidence and then applying critical thinking and then coming up with different suppositions about where the evidence leads us. All that requires a little bit of, gear turning up here. And most people just like stories. They like somebody to go find out what's going on and then just tell them. And that would work if the journalism business was honest, but they're not. So here we are.
I agree. I try to boil it all down to a meme if possible. 0 words or less is the kind of the word. And, Rockefeller super mice, Rockefeller super monkeys. People love Rockefeller monkeys. They love Rockefeller super monkeys. I can't get the same kind of emotion going for super mice. I just can't, no matter how I try. But if you're talking about Bar Harbor, Maine, if you're talking about the closest national laboratory to Meryl Nass, you have to talk about Rockefeller super monkeys and Rockefeller super mice. There's just no way you can avoid it. And you have to talk about the reason for that. And the thing is, if I have a Rockefeller drug and I test it against Rockefeller super mice, they don't die. And if I test against Rockefeller super monkeys, they don't die. And therefore, my drug gets approved to go to the human testing. And if I test against, super athletes from the military, special forces guys in the armed forces that are at the top of their game, I probably don't have the number of deaths and side effects. If I test my competitors against guys that are on terminal cancer at their 80 years old, at a VA hospital, then my competitors look bad. So you have to sometimes boil it down to what is the game? What is the virus vaccine game? How are they playing the game?
Right. And so what is your supposition, and how are you in opposition or indifference to Meryl Nass and her hypothesis?
Well, I think that I'm not really in opposition to Meryl Nass. She kind of jumped out of the background and kind of criticized me.
Right.
And
which is metadata.
Yes, it is metadata.
Yeah.
And she provided things I didn't know. I had a guy in that 2019, it was at the Uranium One trial. Mark Lambert's on trial. It's a Russian espionage case. It's about all these Russians coming into you were up there at the Russian retreat out there on the Chester River, the Rockefellers bringing in these girls. They're having the Rockefeller dinners with J.D. Rockefeller IV's girlfriend is Butina, the redheaded flame-haired Russian agent. So that's the trial. I don't think it's about bioagents. This guy comes in, PhD, University of Delaware, knows Beau Biden somehow from the days that Beau Biden was in Delaware. Said he was connected to the university. Then he said he was the attorney general. But he says he knows Bruce Ivins. He knows the whole story. And Bruce Ivins was a good guy. I worked with Bruce Ivins. I even tried to recapitulate the drive he made from these Ivy League universities.
This is you speaking, or this is
that's
this
him.
other?
That's him speaking.
That's him, right? Okay.
He's a sailboat guy. He raced sailboats on the Chester River where we were out there and that's how he had been watching me. And he said, task force, your dead partner, she had it right. It's all about the bioagents. The bioagents is this Duisburg program. It's Bayer. It's, all these IG Farben conglomerates. They still give these scholarships out. Muhammad Atta had this scholarship. They were working with him with anthrax. 9/11, they put their people into Fort Detrick. So I'm getting this story from him. And all I said to Bob Malone, I was out at the VA hospital, and I'm by the cancer ward at the VA hospital at Bay Pines. And I just say, Bob, I've got a guy who says he was the expert witness in the anthrax case. So Meryl Nass piped up and said, hey, that's, George Webb's right on a lot of things, but he's not on this one. It's hogwash. But, Bruce Ivins had nothing to do with the case. Now we've got whoa. Turns out she was the expert witness, at least one of them. And I'm still not backing down from my guy being right.
So is there a possibility that Bruce Ivins wasn't being straight with you, or was this testimony that he was saying in court?
No. This is a friend of Bruce Ivins. Bruce Ivins died in 2008. So This is a friend saying that he was involved in the whole case. And the whole case, if you remember, is soldiers like these guys, 101st Division and the Karmadocs of the world, going over to Kosovo, and then a little bit later, Iraq 1. It started at Iraq 1. And then ended at sort of Iraq 2. Kosovo would be in the middle there. But they got, in her case, she was with the 101. She got 3 shots and then kind of like had a reaction and stopped. But these shots were causing people to have all kinds of neurological problems, all kinds of side effects and health problems. And it was made by this company in Michigan called Emergent Biosolutions. Bioport was another name. And Bruce Ivins was kind of getting the blame for this. He was the guy who came up with the new improved version. They had a version that was being done by this Kaprowski guy, Hillary Kaprowski, who had come up with this company called Leaderly. Leaderly made a horse-based vaccine. The horse-based vaccine was thought to be in the first Gulf War. The thing was causing side effects. So Bruce Ivins comes up with a new one based on monkey kidney cells, and that has side effects. So he thinks maybe I should do a human one. So Bruce Ivins also does a human one to try to reduce these side effects. But all along the way, they're questioning him. This is before 9/11. This is August of 2000.
Okay, so is Bruce Ivins the guy who was accused of being the anthrax guy?
Bomber? Yes.
Okay, yeah, he was accused. Right. Okay, I'm remembering now.
Yeah, and so this is Bruce Ivins. So I just applied the normal things I do, which is modus operandi, cui bono.
Cui bono.
Who benefits? The most money he can make is $150,000 as a government employee on anything he comes up with at Fort Detrick. Okay? He's not only got the monkey vaccine, but he's also working on the human cell vaccine. So either way, if he has the old or the new, he's the patent owner, right? And the fact that these patents end up, and he's dead, and the patents end up in the hands of Emergent Biosolutions.
Interesting.
Right? And Emergent Biosolutions has got this Saudi guy named Fouad al-Hibri, who's a front man for the Bin Laden group. Right?
Curious.
It's like the guys who did knock down the towers are now going to inherit his patents. You can't make this up, right? It's like directly tied to Bin Laden. So that didn't make any sense to me. The people who benefit from this are either the government, because they get the DHS out of this. The Department of Homeland Security comes from this, and the checking and the screening at airports and the LADO scanners. Bob Malone gets his LADO scanners. And then the other people who benefit are the people who anthrax vaccine was going to be cut off in August of 2001. Not only wasn't it cut off, it was reinstated for another 10 years. And they added civil people, like first responders, like police and fire and ambulance people, and then also teachers. So the beneficiaries were the people who were the Bin Laden group was the beneficiary, not Bruce Ivins.
So when you say they added people, these are people that were being given the vaccine?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
They said, oh, the terror has come to the battlefield's come to America. They had found, or there was a story that there was vaccine found out by Bob Malone out there at Wittenberg, Pennsylvania, 13 miles away. And the ambulance people said that they thought they were exposed to anthrax.
Right.
So we started. So Bruce Ivins did not benefit. Bruce Ivins took all the heat, and
this is again that cui bono. This is a piece of metadata that continually reappears in different stories, which is somebody holds a patent, somebody's not necessarily going along with the program, they pass away, and all of a sudden their patent is being controlled by a big multinational corporation. Is that kind of the pattern?
That's kind of the pattern.
Yeah.
And they're not only into anthrax vaccine, they're also into anti-drug addiction, which again, soldiers, anti-addiction type things. And so anyway, we pulled the Amerithrax case when the FBI's statement about this.
Mm-hmm.
And it says, these statements by Dr. Ivins, this is the FBI's story, that Bruce Ivins is sort of a Lee Harvey Oswald lone gunman. Statements by Mr.
Which is always a piece of metadata, a lone nut.
Yeah, written after the fact. So,
right.
So this is their chance to write what they think their theory of the case is.
And the law says that you cannot libel or slander someone who is dead.
Correct. Yeah, he's dead. He can't defend himself.
Yeah.
So Dr. Ivins and both directors of the previous directors, before they kind of forced out the ones that wouldn't play ball with the Rockefeller, you know, the Sina Bavari, right, is who they put in there for the anthrax thing to quell any, you know, and he's the guy who leaks the coronavirus, right, 20 years later. So it's kind of like a closed loop here. There's not many people that are different in the anthrax cases than the corona cases.
Right,
anyway,
and that's what you discovered early on, as all roads kept leading back to anthrax.
Yeah, everybody's anthrax. Now, I'm not saying it's because anthrax is a great weapon. I'm saying it's because anthrax is an incredibly efficient delivery system for potential for genetic engineering.
Right, so you want to explain that to people who may not understand that?
Sure, it's called an AB toxin, which means you expose somebody to the A toxin first, and then you expose them to the B, and the combination of the two makes the final result. So you expose people to this protective antigen first. It goes out and does these pre-pores on your heart, your lungs, your kidneys, your liver, your blood vessels, etc. But you don't suffer anything. It's your lymph nodes, but you're not suffering. It's not causing bleeding. It's not causing death, cell death yet. But if you add the second component, and it can be years later, when it's injected, that lethal factor or that edema factor, they're called, EF and LF, will immediately find out of your whole body, it will immediately find those protective antigen pores. This is something mRNA cannot do. When you inject mRNA into the body, it doesn't know where to go.
Right.
And this anthrax knows right where to go. So if you put the pore on a tumor, let's say you're smart enough somehow, you could put the pore on the tumor, then you could bring in the lethal toxin and just go after the tumor. So this is all of cancer. This is all of, sometimes there's different things.
So it's like anything else. It's not necessarily a weapon. It could be a therapeutic if it's managed the right way.
If you take out the fangs, if you declaw it, if you detoothify it, if you will, and Bruce Ivins figured out how to do that with this gamma phage.
Okay.
So he's sitting on the gold mine. He's sitting on the how do you stop cancer gold mine potentially. He might not realize that, but I think the people who are running the show are smart enough to realize that. So it's one of these sad stories where this guy is giving all of his heart to try to figure out who the anthrax bomber is. He's cooperating every day with the FBI, which isn't usually a sign, a metadata of somebody is the killer. And, you know, he gets blamed for everything. And then after he's blamed, everybody scoops up his patents and goes and tries to make cancer therapy out of it.
Interesting. Well, it also reminds me, you know, of the two-part, you know, heart attack gun that Chip Tatum was talking to Ted Gunderson about. You know, he said they call it a gun, but it's really a cocktail.
AB type hit once, and then it could be weeks later that you get the second toxin. So it's hard to put those two things together. Let me just read just real quick right from the FBI statement.
Okay.
Because Dr. Ivins demonstrated immediately prior to the anthrax letters attacks, his life work was in jeopardy. Well, yeah, they're blaming him for all the anthrax injuries. In contrast, immediately following the attacks, his career got back on track. Well, are they really, you know, okay, they're saying in order to get his life back on track, he did the anthrax attacks. In contrast, he even received the Exceptional Civilian Service Award for his work on anthrax.
They love giving medals out when you cooperate.
And he hardly could have expected that to happen. So to me, they wouldn't have given him an award unless he was being extremely cooperative after the anthrax attacks. So that doesn't necessarily sound like the killer to me. So here's the second point of the FBI's thing. Bruce Ivins was being subjected to increasing public criticism for his work. Okay, compounding the intense professional pressure on Dr. Ivins.
So when I just to interrupt you for 1 second, when I hear increasing public pressure, I think, who's turning the knob? Because reporters don't spontaneously pick a doctor and say, you know, I think today I'm going to write a story about this doctor who I've never heard of before, who I don't know anything about, unless somebody is calling them up on the phone and saying, hey, I've got an on background thing that I just dropped in your mailbox. You want to take a look at it? It's a pretty good story. That's what turning up the pressure means. With the mighty, you talked about it earlier, the mighty Wurlitzer, right?
I agree with that.
This is somebody turning a knob on the mighty Wurlitzer.
Yeah. And like I said, Dr. Ivins was the increasingly vocal chorus. Professional pressure on Dr. Ivins was the increasingly vocal chorus of critics against him. Chief among these critics were Gary Matsumoto, the journalist, scientist Meryl Nass, and lawyer Mark S. Zaid, Z-A-I-D.
And what are you quoting here again?
This is the FBI summation of the Amerithrax case.
Okay.
So it's the FBI document, not mine. Okay, so who blamed the anthrax vaccine for causing the Gulf War syndrome? And that very well might be true. The anthrax vaccine did cause it. Ailments suffered by veterans from the first Gulf War in the early 1990s. Okay? Through the end of the summer and into the fall of 2001, Dr. Ivins was expressing increasing frustration with his criticism on the work he had been doing. The frustration was only compounded by more demands for information regarding the anthrax vaccine research program, largely from Matsumoto, who had written a critical article in Vanity Fair magazine in May 1999.
That's metadata. Vanity Fair is part of the mighty Wurlitzer.
And who was working on a follow-up book entitled Vaccine A. That's the one I have on my bookshelf, which was eventually published in 2004. Within days of reading Matsumoto's Vanity Fair article, Dr. Ivins commented in an email to a former colleague, "Thanks for passing these along to me. I wonder when the National Enquirer will come out with the headlines, 'Guinea pig soldiers get killer vaccine.'" So the thing that I want to say here is, you can have the best vaccine in the world. I don't know if you want to play the clip, but you can have the best vaccine in the world. But if you have one Jordan Walker,
I just wanted to see how long it was.
She talks about Meryl Nass here. I've seen this clip before.
Well, it's 44 minutes. I'm not sure.
She goes, it's about, I want to say 6 minutes in, she starts talking to Meryl Nass.
Okay. And just for people who know, when I post books on the Duke Report book section, for those of you who don't want to read, because many people don't read, I try to find a video where somebody's talking about the book. Either they're interviewing the author or they have something to do. So not all books have videos about them. The Douglas Reed books, unfortunately, don't have any videos about them, because if they have been made, they've been taken off the internet. But this one happened to have this. So you think it's about 6 minutes in. Here we go.
You'll see it. She'll be in a little voice bubble, I think.
Meryl Nass?
Yeah.
Let me see. I can scroll here. That's 8 minutes. I'm just looking at the thumbnail at the bottom. Can you see the thumbnail?
Yeah, I can see it. I can see it.
But you thought it was at 6 minutes, so
yeah, give it a go at 6 and see what happens. But she was also saying that Stephen Hatfield fit the profile of the killer because he had this Rhodesia experience using anthrax in Rhodesia.
All right. Well,
sunshine, blue skies. Next thing I know, I'm heading for the floor. Me, coffee cup, everything. About 30 to 45 minutes later, I was able to crawl to the bottom of the stairs of my farmhouse and get my wife's attention and tell her something was wrong. Well, she came downstairs. That lasted for about 6 hours that day. But the bad thing of it is it started happening every other day for about a year and a half.
All right. So this is a soldier talking about
Yeah.
the negative impact on him.
Now, I would go a little bit through the soldier stories, and this might be a different video because Amy Goodman had Meryl Nass on a lot, and I think Amy Goodman was at public NPR at the time, and she had a talk show in New York. I met her on 23rd Street one day.
Well, I'm just going through the thumbnails here and looking for Meryl Nass, and
I think right in there. I think right in there. The woman. No,
I don't think so.
no. Okay.
I'm almost all the way through, and nobody has had to suffer. All right. Yeah, there's a blonde. No, I don't see Meryl Nass in this video, so maybe it's another video.
I would give it another click just to give people you've got that video loaded. I'm feeling
All
good
right.
about it.
Okay.
I've seen she covered Meryl Nass a lot.
All right. Well, let me get to Amy. Let's go back to the beginning where Amy
Okay.
Goodman's talking. Okay. Here we go. Amy Goodman's the host, right?
Yes.
Okay.
A military panel took 40 minutes to return a guilty verdict against Private Kamila Ivanowska and 2 hours to determine her penalty. Ivanowska was charged with a bad conduct discharge, which is just one level behind dishonorable discharge. The prosecutor had asked the panel to give her 6 months in jail. She told her superior she considered the shot medically dangerous to children she might have in the future. And Private Kamila Ivanowska joins us on the phone right now. Welcome to Democracy Now!
Thank you very much.
So you've been thrown out of the military?
Yes, I was, well, not officially yet, but yeah, I received that kind of discharge. So soon I'll be following, they will follow up with, removing me from the base.
Can you explain further why you refused to take the anthrax vaccine?
Sure. Well, what happened was, the refusal goes back to, prior to my military service. That's when I was made aware of anthrax vaccine by one of my friends who declined to join Air Force for that reason. And, she raised a red flag in my mind. So what I did, I phoned my recruiter and I asked if I, would have to take the anthrax vaccine even if I were to deploy. And at that time, I was told that the vaccine is not required. So I went ahead and sign up for the military, and and then I was faced with this, with the fact of anthrax again in November 2002, when once again I was told by a military physician that I would not have to take the vaccine, and then on January I officially refused it, and I was charged with disobeying an order. And my main reason why is because the side effects that I read about were alarming. There was a lot of people who were getting sick from that, particular.
Critical thinking. She was using critical thinking, and she benchmarked her critical thinking against a story. So the military was telling her a story, and she was using her critical thinking. This is why the military does not like critical thinking. They don't like critical thinkers. They don't want anyone to think. They want the people to do what they're told.
She also sounds like she's from the Rockefeller Enclave, the Russian retreat out there on the Chester River.
She does, yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I went in the Air Force.
Emergency. Everybody to get from street.
I am an American as apple pie.
Indeed.
Buck Rogers, Betty Boop.
So anyway, so the clip that we were looking for that we didn't have on that page, that if I go and I can go stick on that Vaccine A page, because that video I found because it had something to do with what I'll normally do is I'll put the title of the book in and the author, and then I'll see what video pops up, and I'll watch 5 minutes of it. And if it has something to do with the with the book, then I'll put the video in there. But you're saying that there are Meryl Nass interviews talking about the same thing?
Talking to Amy Goodman, I've heard. And I'll just read another piece. This is the FBI theory. George's theory is the bin Ladens, along with Cofer Black, are going to be the key beneficiaries. They're going to get all the patents if Bruce Ivins dies, plus they're going to get the key to unlock cancer, okay, which is going to be in the trillions. Bruce Ivins gets 150,000. Okay, wait a minute. So I'll just read it. Bruce Ivins' offense at these criticisms grew as Matsumoto was making FOIA requests for information about the vaccine program that he used for the critical vaccine A. He had a lot of soldier stories in vaccine A. Okay. For example, before the letter attacks in August and September of 2001, Ivins sent emails to a co-worker and supervisor, which included a sample of which included, tell Matsumoto to kiss my ass. Okay, we've got better things to do than shine his shoes and pee on command. He'd already given him a lot of stuff. He's gotten everything from me he will get. The prosecution team learned about the depth of Ivins' animosity toward Matsumoto in February 13th, 2018 interview, in which Ivins stated that he had actually gone to Matsumoto's website in recent years under the anonymous name Guest and made sarcastic, provocative postings. One of many examples was Dr. Ivins' ability to harbor grudges. This is how he's harboring grudges. So here he is trying to defend himself on Matsumoto's website. This isn't Ken Hale loading up a whole bunch of Navy SEALs from a U.S. Army base, right? Or from a U.S. Navy base and saying, I'm 5 minutes away from your house and I'm going to Jonestown your family and I'm going to Waco your family and I'm bringing flamethrowers. That's a different kind of threat than making a sarcastic comment about your reporting about me, right? But that's the FBI's case. The Ken Hale example I gave happened to me from a U.S. State Department person, right?
Indeed.
This is, he said he was a guest and he said something nasty, like a meme or something on the guy's website. That's what they got on him, right? So, and then there was the one other piece about Meryl Nass, but let me know when you get the video. I won't read it if you've got the video, but.
No, I'll show you where I'm at and what I was doing. You mentioned Gary Matsumoto's website, and apparently there's a musician also named Gary Matsumoto. So I was, again, and this might be signature reduction. It's like, quick, let's find a pianist named Gary Matsumoto and do 500 web pages on him so that we can.
Gary Matsumoto, if you're out there, we'd love to have you on the show. We'd love to have you on the show and ask you all these questions. Meryl Nass, I repeat again, I sent her an email. I sent her an invitation publicly. We'd love to have you on the show. I'll read from the FBI document. Similarly,
It's interesting. Here's his biography, and it's got an outline. Do you see that? There's no picture of him.
Well, I don't know why anybody would. I mean, like I say, after the Ken Hale experience, I didn't go into hiding. I went ahead and said there was a State Department person reporting to the top level of NATO in the Wuhan Games. I mean, that was after the Ken Hale death threats.
Right.
Very credible. And I gave those death threats to Donnie O'Sullivan. And he chose not to cover that. And he chose not to say a State Department person was there, armed diplomatic security services, reporting to the top level of NATO. He left those things out of the story because it's fake news. So similarly, over the years, Dr. Ivins continued to speak disparagingly of Meryl Nass. Now, Meryl Nass, one of the things she said is, I knew Bruce Ivins. She didn't say that she spoke disparagingly of Bruce Ivins. She said, I knew Bruce Ivins.
Right.
And my question is,
we'll pull that up. We could pull that up.
When did you know Bruce Ivins? Did you know him at Fort Detrick? Did you know him in the summer of 2001 when he said, the FBI says you were criticizing him? When did you meet him? Did you meet Stephen Hatfield there? Did you meet Nancy Haywood, who was an FBI informant the FBI brought in? Did you meet any of the other, Robert Cadillac or Callahan or Sina Bavari? You know, Robert Malone, did you know Robert Malone, Daryl Galloway? So these are the questions, right? Okay. Similarly, and we're just asking for transparency. We're not asking for, like somebody's firstborn here. It's
right.
easy.
And if we're and if the assumption is wrong, explain to us why it's wrong, how it's wrong. Yeah.
I said the answer to all those questions. I said no. See how easy that is? Two seconds. Okay. So Dr. Ivins continued to speak disparagingly of Meryl Nass, another prominent critic in much the same vein. Those who worked knew that Nass was one of the topics you avoided discussing around Ivins. They also noted that Dr. Ivins took criticism, especially of his work, very personally. Finally, lawyer Mark S. Zaid filed the greatest number of FOIA requests with regard to the anthrax vaccine. Zaid, the executive of the James Madison Project, represented military clients who refused to take the vaccine. Zaid began sending emails to Dr. Ivins and U.S. AMRID as far back as 1999, requesting information on the vaccine. Okay. In addition, during November 2007 search of Ivins' residence, okay, why are they searching his residence, right? They recovered a black briefcase, which Dr. Ivins had labeled attorney-client privilege, but ultimately was determined by a filter team not to contain privileged material. And he had a laminated article in July of 2000, Washington Post, entitled Anthrax Shots Effect Challenged. Okay. Army disputes expert who reviewed vaccine tests. Okay. And the article discussed a report by Dr. Bruce Ivins, dated September 23rd, 1991. That's right after the Gulf War, right? In which he noted that although all vaccinated monkeys, they call monkeys C1 to C10, so all vaccinated monkeys from this vaccine appeared to be sick over the course of the 2-week post challenge. So they challenged the monkey's immune system. None of them died, but all of them appeared sick 2 weeks later. Okay, the Washington Post drew the conclusion that vaccinated soldiers would have the same symptoms.
Wow.
Soldiers who are exposed to anthrax may become quite sick and incapacitated for up to 2 weeks, even though they have received the full set of anthrax vaccinations. So here he's not hiding it.
Right.
He's not saying, oh, the monkeys got sick, I'll type the monkeys didn't get sick. He's typing the monkeys all got sick. So how is that a smoking gun? To me, that's him saying all the monkeys got sick. And they're using that. I don't think it was Bruce Ivins' decision to go forward with the vaccine based on whether the monkeys got sick or not. His job was to determine if the monkeys got sick.
Right.
So I don't see any of these things as being particularly incriminating. And I don't see how it's his fault. If he said the monkeys got sick for 2 weeks and then the soldiers got sick, then it would be like vindication. I told you so.
Well, but the argument is really about establishing a chain of command. You know, if his job is to determine whether or not it's safe and effective, and then he comes up with the results that show that it's not safe and effective and it gets deployed, that doesn't necessarily mean that he recommended that it be deployed. It only means that he came to the conclusion that it wasn't. Is that correct?
That's right. And the person who did make the decision is Colin Powell and General Schwarzkopf. It went all the way to the top. Colin Powell even knew the name of the horse that generated the vaccine, something like First Flight or something like that.
Interesting.
So the decision definitely was made. And Schwarzkopf, before the invasion, the first invasion, was, well, if we can't vaccinate NATO troops and our troops, we shouldn't give it to anybody, because then it's going to seem like we want to protect our own and not NATO. And there was a lot of talk back and forth.
And is this related to Gulf War syndrome?
They said it, well, Meryl Nass, I believe, said that it caused the Gulf War syndrome.
Okay.
And what I'm saying is all you need is one guy over there at the Leaderly factory, Hillary Kaprowski, again, he's the guy that has all the cancers that come out of the vaccine for polio. 1/6 of all people in the United States, because something gets added in the Cutter Industries vaccine, right? So he's got a bad vaccine record. He's the same guy over there in Pearl River, New York, where I stood twice for 2 nights, right, and asked James O'Keefe to come out and meet me.
Yeah.
Right. That's this place where Hillary Kaprowski was for the anthrax vaccine. And if a guy has that kind of background for contaminating the vaccines and spiking the vaccines, the first guy I'm going to look at is Kaprowski. Right? You already did 25 million Americans, and they've all got cancers now. That's the first guy I'm going to be looking at when the anthrax vaccine gets spiked, not Bruce Ivins.
Right.
Right? I'm going to look at the guy with the smoking gun in his hand, or 2 smoking guns in his hand.
So what do you think is motivating this? So here's the tweet from Meryl Nass where she was quote tweeting you.
Yeah.
As someone intimately involved with Doe versus Rumsfeld and someone who knew Bruce Ivins, okay, so claim to authority, I can assure you that what George is saying below is hogwash. Ivins had nothing whatsoever to do with our Doe versus Rumsfeld case. And is the citation that you just read from the Doe versus Rumsfeld case, or
the screenshots I have below are from Doe v. Rumsfeld.
Okay,
you see below.
Yep, I see. George gets a lot right, and he also gets things very wrong. Malone similarly had nothing to do with the case. The question is, who is feeding George and why? So now what she's doing is she's pretending, or the assumption here. The question is, who is feeding George and why? So who is the evildoer who is providing George? As far as I can tell, George is looking at metadata. You would tell me right now if you had a source on this, right?
I told her exactly. I said the guy who met me out at Greenbelt when I was doing the Mark Lambert trial came out and said he was a friend of Bruce Ivins, and he worked at University of Delaware, and he was a PhD in virology, and he said that Bruce Ivins was involved in this investigation and in this trial.
Right.
So I'm just reporting it. If it's wrong, I told her in a whole series of things. I said, if it's wrong, great, but I'm telling you who's feeding me the information.
Right. So this is like when Deep Blackberry came and met you in the bar and gave you all the information. You made full disclosure. You met a guy in a bar. You had too much to drink. He started telling you that he worked for Biden. You know, he showed you a State Department issued BlackBerry with a number on the back that happened to be the same number as the Von Karman line. Yada, yada, yada. Right? Do I have that correct?
Double-edged sword drinking. Because you've got a lot of information that wouldn't have otherwise come out. So it's a double-edged sword.
And George can usually drink other people under the table.
Well, I'm just saying it's part of the job, right? I mean, it's
sure.
Being a spy, right? You got to be able to drink with them and get them to talk, right?
Indeed.
So it's part of the job. But if you notice, I put in to the in response to Meryl, I said, hey, if I got any part of this story wrong, come on the Duke Report. I produced the New York Times report.
And that offer is still valid. Yeah. Come on, anytime we'll talk about it.
He had the 2 patents, right? He was subject to the criticism for almost a decade. The criticism I just read started in 1991 from that Vanity Fair article. They've been hammering for 10 years on this, saying it's your fault, Bruce Ivins, that all these soldiers are sick from Gulf 1 and Gulf 2. No, it's not. It's Rumsfeld giving Saddam Hussein the anthrax, and that caused a Manhattan Project to try to come up with an anthrax vaccine. So they started putting all this pressure on the people at Fort Detrick to come up with a vaccine and putting the pressure on to cut corners. So Bruce Ivins is under the heat here for 10 years. Why is it just Bruce Ivins? If it's not safe and effective, and somebody's looking at this data and said all 10 monkeys got sick for 2 weeks.
I can hypothesize.
Well, I've read the story.
Here's my hypothesis. Somebody wanted him to sell the patent. But okay, I mean, I'm reading I'm reading Controversy of Zion right now, and one of the things, and I've been thinking as I'm reading this book, I'm thinking a lot about Whitney Webb's 2-volume book, One Nation Under Blackmail, because it's interesting how politicians will, evolve their their stands on things. And my hypothesis at this point is that whenever somebody evolves in their thinking, whenever somebody goes left instead of right, whenever Vanity Fair of all magazines starts pounding on is he a biochemist? What's it? Or he's a
he's a biochemist at Fort Detrick.
When Vanity Fair magazine, which is a culture magazine ostensibly, starts banging on I missed it again. Biogeneticist. Is that right?
He's a virologist.
He's a virologist. When a culture magazine starts banging on a virologist, that's metadata. Okay. They're supposed to be talking about what Madonna wore to the Met Gala. Okay. Vanity Fair is not a magazine that, sometimes, but again, Playboy is the same thing. They say Playboy, I only read the articles. Playboy fits into the same kind of Mockingbird, Mighty Wurlitzer framework, where it's a magazine that appeals to people who have a certain mindset, but every once in a while there's a smart article in it. So you've got a culture magazine running an article about a virologist, okay, and they're banging on him. It's a hit piece, right?
For 10 years.
So to me, the metadata, cui bono, who benefits from that is, hey, dude, we offered you a lot of money for that patent and you won't sell us the patent. So we're going to ruin you until you get to a point where you have to sell us the patent because it's the only way to make the pain stop. And if that doesn't work, then something really bad is going to happen to you.
I don't think Meryl Nass is any part of that because
I'm not suggesting that she is. No.
I know you don't either.
Yeah.
Because up until this point, to me, Meryl Nass was the warrior. She is the only one who had enough courage other than me. I mean, I went to South Africa based on what she said, right? She's the only person other than me that said, Bruce, that the anthrax was used by the Selka scouts by Stephen Hatfield in Rhodesia. The metadata with 500 dead on one side and 0 dead and no wounded on the other is a anthrax-like metadata. I went to Srebrenica. When you have 850 dead and nobody fired a shot, that's metadata that there was an anthrax attack in those mountains, right? I went there. We went winding all through the mountains, and I went there, and I've interviewed the guy who wrote the book on it, Alexander Doran. He said, if you go there, you'll see 2/3 of the names are Cyrillic. Now, what kind of people, when they do a massacre, shoot most of their own people and a little bit of the enemy? Usually you kill all the enemy. And it was true. The graveyard was divided, so the Muslims were all facing Mecca. Right? It was about 1/3, and about 2/3 were all the Cyrillic names. That's another signature of a bioagent attack because it kills everybody. It doesn't care. Anybody with lungs is going to die. And so that's why I keep going back to these NATO wars, right? And I keep going back to Bosnia and especially Kosovo. So, and David Petraeus, always David Petraeus is always there. So with the 101, Karmadoc ran into some problems with David Petraeus. Always David Petraeus.
Interesting.
So I think the military, like you say, the pressure came from not Meryl Nass as a scientist and a doctor. She was supporting, hey, these people are not faking. They have real neurological effects, and I'm all agreeing with that. What I'm saying is you can add an adjuvant, and they were looking at all kinds of adjuvants to make the anthrax vaccine more effective. You can add an adjuvant that somehow gets into the acetylcholine channel or into the spinal cord or whatever, and then all of a sudden you've got all kinds of neurological things going on that you didn't know happened before, because you're getting stuff that shouldn't be in the neurological column, and it's getting in there, and it's causing all kinds of exhaustion and all these other things that happen with the Gulf War syndrome. And that could be somebody's adjuvant that they've added.
Right.
Right. After the fact, and Bruce Ivins doesn't know about it. So they needed Meryl Nass to say, to evaluate the science of this. But as far as who made the decision to go ahead with it after he said all 10 monkeys got sick, that's who owns this thing. And that was 10 years of criticism he took after he said all 10 monkeys got sick.
Well, my gut tells me that when a culture magazine goes after a virologist, it's because somebody dropped a dime on him, and they kept dropping dimes on him because they wanted him to sell them his patent. Yeah.
And there was two. He actually had two. And the other thing is his advanced patent leaked out to Port and Down. Fort Detrick and Port and Down kind of worked like, well, if we invent something over here and we can't take advantage of it commercially, we'll farm it out to you over to Port and Down. You could say you discovered it, and then we'll be the American company over here to commercialize it. Right. And then they do the same thing when they invent something over there. We invent it through Port Detrick over here, and then they commercialize it. So they've been playing this kind of tennis game with these patents for a long time. This isn't new. Mm-hmm. And then this is the virus vaccine game. It's not Bruce Ivins saying all 10 monkeys got sick. The virus vaccine game is the big ball players that are making $1 trillion on this technology. That's who's moving the pieces here. So I'm shocked. Here's the thing: I can tell you, Bob Malone had nothing to do with this. Is what Meryl Nass says. Meryl, did you ever see him at Fort Detrick? What day was that? When did you first meet Bob Malone? When did you first meet Nancy Higley? When did you first meet Stephen Hatfield? When did you first meet Bruce Ivins? When did you first meet Gary Matsumoto? When did you first meet, Cadillac? These are the simple questions that America just wants to know. This is the biggest bioterror event ever in the history of the United States, which leads to another event with all the same people, which is the greatest live.
Well, if you don't count polio vaccine.
Well, that bioterror, I said. Maybe if bioterror, yeah, you're right. Maybe it's the third. It's the third Kaprowski event, right? Yeah. Who worked for Rockefeller, just saying.
Right. Well, before we get to questions, though, I just wanted to change channels for 1 second. Sure. Because I noticed something right before we went live, and that's this. Let me see, share screen. Getting into the cui bono of it. Let me see if this is it. Yeah. So this appeared on a couple of Italian websites in 2020, and that somebody tweeted out today, which is that there is let me see if I can find the other one. Palestine. I'll share to this one. There's 1.2 trillion cubic feet of natural gas in the territorial waters off of Gaza, and BP has the lease on that, and the lease is up in 2024.
Well, Braverman Prophecy, there's 4 parts on my Substack if you want to learn all about it. It's been since 2016 we've been talking about the lines are drawn by pipelines, and you follow the lines, you always are right. And if you look at North Gaza and South Gaza, North Gaza is the one that has the rights to this Marine 1 and Marine 2 and a little bit of the OR find. And guess what? We said for that reason, Avi Braverman will split Gaza, north and south, and they'll keep the north part and they'll get rid of the south part.
And the Israelis have split Gaza at this point. Right?
It has happened exactly as it was prophesized, right? And there's also biblical prophecy here too. In 2 days, 2,000 years in God time, right? This would all happen as well. So it's good timing from a lot of different perspectives.
Indeed. Well, I just thought I'd put that out there. Okay, we'll get to questions here or comments. Sergeant Stadenko says that he went to a PTSD clinic at Bay Pines. So if we have any questions about Bay Pines, I know how to get in touch with Sergeant Stadenko.
That was also task force had volunteered, and there was a murder of 3 of the women that ran that facility. Task force had volunteered at a similar VA PTSD clinic, and that's where she had gotten her special forces stuff reporting.
All right, here we go. Connie says, George, do you see a similarity between what happened to Bruce Ivins and what happened to Carrie Mullis?
Yes, he had an invention as well, which, is changed the world, which is PCR. PCR, people they think of it, oh, I'm going to identify a virus. It also is an amplifier. So if I have one cell, I can make a billion from that. And if you have an efficient enough PCR thing, I can do vaccines that way. You've heard Rick Bright. If I have one sample template, I can make a billion vaccines from that. It's an ambition. It hasn't been done yet, but this is exactly what our good friend Elon Musk is doing at CureVac with Tesla. Tesla's investment in CureVac is exactly this idea of amplification. And everybody knew, Josh Lederberg discovered Carrie Mullis. Everybody on through knew that this was a killer franchise, $1 trillion invention. Right. So yeah, it's very similar.
All right, so here we go. Connie also asked, wasn't DARPA also a beneficiary of the AVA vaccine through Emergent Biosolutions after Bruce Ivins' death from a Tylenol? Bruce Ivins died of a Tylenol overdose?
A 3-day Tylenol overdose.
You would think that a virologist would know not to take too much Tylenol.
Over 3 days.
Over 3 days. Like, come on. It's football players know it. Basketball players know it. Everybody, people are read in, right? That's nonsense. Carol Anderson says, could you please link direct order doc? I searched twice. What I found doesn't look the same. I'm not sure I know what direct order doc is. But if you send me an email at contact@the Duke Report, I'm happy to help you find whatever it is that you need. One of our members reached out to me the other day, George, and said that she wanted me to go over how I take PDFs and turn them into EPUBs. And I told her I'm happy to do that as a one-on-one with her if she wants me to do that.
If you need ivermectin or if you need hydroxychloroquine, go to KarmaDoc. I've seen her individually. I've seen how she handles it. She calls the people. She doesn't just put stuff in the mail. She goes through the complete questionnaire, bang, 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 family history, the whole schmeal. I watched it happen in front of my eyes about 20 times. She's America's frontline doctor. She's the only one who's really put her ass on the line in combat with the 101. So I know this person. I can speak to it. I wouldn't vouch for anybody else unless I've been there 2 weeks building a deck in her backyard. Okay. So I know this person. I know where they live. It's the real deal. If you're going to get ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine from somebody, I would trust KarmaDoc. She's been incredibly generous with her knowledge, and I have nothing. She's not particularly fond of me. I'm probably a neutral on her scale. She likes other people on YouTube a lot more. She sponsors them. That's fine. I don't care. I'll say what the truth is. And she is a great doctor, first of all. I showed her the plasmid diagram for the Pfizer vaccine, and she immediately, there's T7, signal, there's the enhancer, there's a promoter. And
she said, I think she's welcoming. I think she's welcoming you back, George, because she says that deck could use some finishing.
See, she's criticizing Andy Dabala's corner post, right? She's criticizing Andy Dabala's corner post. I'm blaming Andy on that corner post, but it still looks fine. And if you extend the deck out, it's going to be okay. But I like I say, I don't play favorites here. Okay, she is the person I would go to that I trust, that will do a good job and will not prescribe something to you that's not in your best interest. And that's really what doctoring is about. It's not about making as much money as you can. You're sending shit out through the mail and you don't even know who you're sending it to, right?
Indeed. JBGT3 says, Peter, were you familiar with the site behindthenews.com? The name is familiar to me. It disappeared after June or July 2023. I liked the author and his analysis. Time Machine shows the last date he was on. I'll go take a look. Sam Parker say again?
Sam Parker was his name.
Sam Parker was his name, according to my producer wife. No, but I'll go check it out. JBTG3 always gives us good leads here. So I'll go take a look at that. But other than that, George, you got anything else?
I remember a guy with Doug Henwood in Australia. Is it the Australian news now outlet, Behind the News? Anyway, this guy's British. Sam Parker is British, but he worked for GQ. But the guy I remember was a guy named Henwood. But
well, it's interesting because getting back to kind of truth in journalism, because one of the things I really kind of like about Douglas Reed is that he kept sending stories to London. He was the kind of Central European reporter for the Times of London in New York, and London, the Times of London in New York. Now, the Times of London in London, and he was driving in front of the Reichstag when it caught on fire, and he was continually sending stories to London, and they were spiking his stories, and so he decided that he would rather be an author and just write books, because at least he'd be able to get the stories out. And so he resigned from the Times of London. Go on.
I was just going to say, Alan Dulles invited a lot of people to the burning of the Reichstag. He invited a lot of journalists to meet him there at that coffee shop. How many did he invite? Everybody and their brother seemed to be there the night that the Reichstag burned, right? I can't remember. The list is like there's 500 people that were outside the Reichstag that got invited to that coffee shop.
Interesting.
And if you wrote the article that Alan
Which book is that in?
Just as an amalgamation of all the different people who've said that they were there the night the Reichstag burned. But if you put them all together, the ones that went on to the next level were the people that wrote crazy lone nutcase guy set fire to the Reichstag. Jewish guy set fire to the Reichstag, because that's the mass.
Well, yeah, I think Douglas Reed went and actually covered the trial and everything. He was there the whole time. But it makes me think that we need to have ChatGPT write another song, the night the Reichstag burned, to the night they burned old Dixie down.
I thought you were going to the night Chicago died. I thought you were going to do it.
Either one.
Yeah. So
I don't know.
I definitely think there's a musical future for the burning of the Reichstag. That's a musical.
Right? It's got to be Mel Brooks, though. I think.
Yeah, it's got to be Goebbels singing from the balcony. It's got to be Hitler doing a tap shuffle. It's got to have fun for the whole family.
All right. Well, with that, George, if people want to support this channel, if you look immediately below George Webb's smiling face, you'll see a URL there, and it's Buy Me a Coffee. Is this a new book? That's an old book.
It's a 400-page book that I wrote for Neighborhood News 3 years ago, two and a half years ago.
And can people get that book?
People can get it when I update it and put it out on Substack.
Okay.
So if you're part of Anthrax, see the one tower is the Anthrax 911 tower.
Mm-hmm.
The other tower is the Corona 911 tower. He's a part of both. Isn't that interesting that this guy here?
It's very Masonic, George.
Yeah. We threw this is Andy Duvall's cover. We threw everything in but the kitchen sink on the budget on this. So I think it was like we gave Andy like a whole sandwich card, like for Subway, like 4 sandwiches if he would do this. So.
Well, good job, Andy. Good job. Anyway, if you want to support George Webb, and if you want to be the first person to know when that George republishes that book on his Substack, then if you go to georgewebb.substack.com and you become a subscriber to George Webb's Substack, then you will get access to all of George Webb's books that he has republished on Substack, and he's adding new ones all the time. And these are books that he published before, but because of the various machinations of the internet, they've become unavailable, and George is trying to remake them available. So you can do that if you go to georgewebb.substack.com. And if you just want to send George some spondoolies, as my Scottish friends would say, you could go to buymeacoffee.com/George Webb, no E, number 1, which is also in the URL right below George's name there. And if you want to support me and you want to support the Duke Report, and you want to get early access to Well, I used to promise early access to the book, but I haven't posted much of that lately. But there's a members library that has all my research materials for the book that I'm working on now. And we also do a Zoom call once a month, which we'll have to schedule in the next couple of days. And you could talk to George and me directly. If you want to support that, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/The Duke Report. And you'll, by becoming a member there too, you also get access to all of my members only posts that are, it's Buy Me a Coffee is like Substack. If you don't pay, then there's certain content that's available. And if you do pay, then there's other content that becomes available. So with that, George, I will see you on Thursday.
Last comment, Peter.
Indeed.
I'm sorry. Last week there was some complaints I got about, Scott. He was, a scientist, so he's, he gives too technical of an explanation because he's kind of buried in the science. And I have gotten so much flack from so many trolls that say this is a fake voice that I piped in from, Schenectady. Mm-hmm. I thought, you know what? I'm going to put him out there. And he was like, I love Peter Duke, and here's the Duke Report shirt. He's not a real formal guy.
I like Scott. I just thought that by doing a left turn in a show that we were doing about Gaza, we weren't giving him the benefit of a graphic that says what the video is about, and then kind of maybe a presentation where he could be a little bit more deliberate about the way that he's presenting himself. That was my only comment.
Yeah. And because I was in Tampa, I wanted to be next to him so that people could see it wasn't green screen. He was a real person, and DNA. So now we're done with that. From now on, Peter, absolutely. We'll have the deck prepared and all that.
Yeah. I just want to, I've been trying to get my vape thing. I ordered new batteries today so I could get my vape thing working so that I could do the Allison. So
I'm now an armed diplomatic security services person, not reporting to the head of NATO, but I am now carrying small vials of
Allison.
Yeah, and it's not even a drug. It's a food product.
Yes, it's purified garlic or something, right?
Yeah. And so now I'm an armed diplomatic security services person for these little things of garlic. So there you have it.
Indeed. All right. Well, George, I will see you again then on Thursday. Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right.